We're a couple weeks past the news about Fanatics taking over these sports card licenses. The dust has settled a little bit, and we still haven't really gotten that much news. But in this video, I'm going to tell you about why I think this could be good or why it will be bad for the sports card industry. My name is Adam from Herosforsale, and over the past 3 years, I've created over 2,000 pieces of content that are sports card related. So if you like sports cards, make sure you hit the subscribe button, and if you have any comments or learned anything new from this video, make sure you go and drop a comment. One thing that I think has been kind of interesting, and I think they're probably waiting for the industry summit, has been the fact that Fanatics hasn't made an official announcement themselves. Based on the way that they kind of did this deal, I could see the reason being that they're trying to get more of their ducks in a row because, you know, it wasn't really something where they said they were going to get the MLB license and then like a couple months later it was like, now we're getting the NBA, and then a couple months later it was the NFL. It seemed like all of the announcements kind of came at once, and they didn't make a formal announcement. There was just a bunch of news articles that came out that kind of, I guess I don't know if they necessarily were leaking information. I'm sure Fanatics was probably the one that was telling them this. But then the news kind of came out from Topps that like they were totally thrown off guard and they didn't see any of this coming. And I don't know. I've talked to people and they've talked to people at Topps, and that's kind of the news that they've been saying. And I think that there's probably more to the story than that they were just totally thrown off guard and they had no idea that this was going to happen, because like, this is a, for Topps, there's no, Topps and the MLB, there's no way that the MLB doesn't know how important they are for Topps. And Topps obviously doesn't, they do know that how important the MLB license is for them. So I just don't see, I don't see a reason why MLB wouldn't give Topps a heads up that this was going to happen. So, I think we're going to find out over the next few years exactly what happened. Like, I could see some sort of 30 for 30 or some sort of documentary about this, because it's going to change the industry, and I don't necessarily know if we know what's going to happen. I think there's been tons of speculation. There's been tons of, is this good? Is this bad? And I mean, I just don't think at this point we really know whether it is good or bad. And I think I'm optimistic about the move because I think Fanatics has sort of shown, with Josh Luber, for example. Josh Luber is the one that's been rumored to be kind of the leader of this change, and he's going to be the one that's taking over the sports card division there at Fanatics. And if you remember back at the 2019 National, StockX was one of the first kind of mainstream companies that came into the sports card world and started, making their way and making waves in the sports card community. And I just think you look at another example would be that like they were one of the first mainstream companies that came in. They also, before they even had sports cards up on their website, they were at the National. And I don't know if that was to kind of gauge the popularity or what it was, but obviously they're not just making these decisions on a whim. So like, I think that they probably knew they were going to have sports cards on their website eventually. And I think what you're seeing with that, for example, I think for sneakers and for sports betting, and this is sort of why I think sports cards are kind of combining and becoming more part of popular culture in general, is that like, I think the perception of who is collecting cards has changed pretty significantly. Like, I think if you were to look at what it was before, maybe even a couple years ago, I feel like the perception was it was like this guy who, he had this collection from when he was a kid, and he just goes through it or whatever. And I don't necessarily think it was a good perception, if I'm going to be completely honest. Like, I think it was more like a nerdy guy, which I don't even really like using that term necessarily when it comes to sports cards, because if you look at all the people who were in sports cards, that wasn't who was in cards, at least. That's in my opinion. Like, I knew people that were either getting back in or were back in, and none of them were really like that. So like, it was weird to me that was sort of the perception of what people that liked cards was. It's the same, and I look at it the same way. It's coming closer into the mainstream. Like, you look at like celebrities that are into it now, but also you look at investing, and for example, like in the stock market. Like, if you look at the perception of who was investing in the stock market, it was some guy in a suit in some like high level office. But now it's like, it's becoming more accessible to everybody. So like, the everyday person is just investing in the stock market nowadays. So like, and it's the same with sports betting is the other example I'm going to use. Like, if you looked at a sports bettor, let's just say 5 years ago, the perception of what that person looked like was some like sketchy guy in the back of a restaurant that was like had this like little black book, and like, you know, he had like 3 cell phones, and like you would go to him and you'd ask him and he'd call up a guy and be like, okay, you're in. But now it's like the average, it's becoming more mainstream, and the average regular person, also the fact that it's becoming legal in states too, which sports cards were never illegal, but like I think the fact that betting is becoming legal in more states, it's also making it more mainstream, which is what's happening with sports cards as well. So I think, you know, bringing in like, and then maybe even with sneakers too. I think sneaker culture is kind of, I think it's a little bit slower maybe in terms of how more mainstream it's becoming, like the regular person kind of getting into sneakers and flipping sneakers. But I think you look at that and you say, you know, Josh Luber was coming in 2019. He had StockX. He had created StockX. He comes to the National. They start putting cards on StockX. And it was one of the first mainstream companies that really built, or they already had the platform in place, but really built more cards and put more stuff onto their platform compared to other companies that maybe were trying to kind of dabble a little bit, but weren't really taking it seriously. And a little bit back to how they kind of announced this. Like, I think what Fanatics is probably going to do is they're probably going to wait until they have some sort of sports card product in place before they start announcing all of the licensing stuff. Now, at the industry summit, I think there's a chance that they could do some sort of announcing, but I don't see them really announcing anything fully until they have some sort of product in place, which I think 2023, I think, is the first year that they have the MLB license. I don't think they have the MLB PA license until 2025, which means, or 2024, I forget the exact date. And then same with the NFL and NBA license. I think that's 2025 for those licenses. But I would say they're probably going to make some sort of product that's, you know, that's maybe unlicensed. You know, maybe they try and get the license for some other player that they're, or some other sport that they're able to bring on and kind of make cards for them, just to show like what they have in store and what the quality they can do. I also don't think it's out of the realm of possibility that potentially Topps or Panini gets bought by Fanatics, because, you know, Topps, that was one of the big things that happened. Like the day before Topps was going to go public in that SPAC deal with Muds, I believe, which was a company that was going to merge with a different company and then bring them public and then bring them onto the stock exchange. They announced that they were taking over the license like the day before the deal was supposed to be official and that they were supposed to go live. So I think you look at that and say, like, Topps basically just lost their top entity, which also at the same time, I think Topps has some pretty solid other company or some other licenses that I think are a big deal, like F1. They have WWE, they have Star Wars, they have UEFA Champions League. I mean, they have a Garbage Pail Kids, which some people may not think is a big deal. I think Panini is in more trouble kind of than Topps is, just because Topps has a lot more entities and a lot more other products that they come out with, where Panini, you know, they do have other licenses. They have the UFC license. I think they also have the UEFA license. I think they have the Premier League license. But I think Topps is definitely in a better spot. And when Topps loses this license, they're losing basically their top entity in their company. So that was one of the main reasons, honestly, that they just weren't able to go public, because, like, the company, like, what do you expect to happen? Like, if you know, you just lose basically one of your top revenue streams or one of your top reasons you're making revenue in your sports card business, obviously that's going to nix the deal and they're not going to be able to do it anymore. So what I think that could lead to is Fanatics end up just buying Topps, or maybe not even buying Topps necessarily, like buying the infrastructure that Topps has, like as assets. Like maybe not buy the company, but buy either some of their warehouses or buy something that they have that's going to help them create cards, which realistically I think just buying Topps may be the way to go. Or if there's a way that they can buy the Topps sports brand, like, because like I said, all the candy and stuff falls under the other categories for Topps. So I don't know if necessarily Fanatics wants to be buying that stuff, but at the same time, like, I just think the fact that you look at Topps and how they have been able to produce cards over the past few years, and same with Panini. I mean, they've definitely ramped up their infrastructure when it comes to how many cards they're able to buy or how many cards they're able to produce. So I think I look at that and say I could see Fanatics potentially buying one of these companies. And, you know, I think this is kind of one of the last points I'll get into. Like, I think one of the things that kind of I thought was a little bit crazy was that people thought that this was going to ruin sports cards because Fanatics is kind of they've taken over the memorabilia industry, and like I said, I just don't think anybody really knows. So like if you're still seeing opinions that this is going to ruin the industry, I just don't think so because Fanatics is like they're like in the billions when it comes to how much revenue and like how much their business costs, how much their business is. So like they're not just going to invest all this money into these licenses just to kind of tear down all the infrastructure that's already been built, especially the fact that like Josh Luber, like if you go to his Instagram page, like there's tons of sports card stuff even way before 2020, like 2019, 2018. He's kind of in this culture, so it's not like he really has a good reason why he would want to come in and totally change everything up. Like people are saying that they're going to go just into NFTs, that they're going to go just into digital, that they're going to take away all the products. Like I don't know. I don't think that's what's going to happen. So I think the fact that a company as big as Fanatics is willing to invest in the sports card industry is a good thing. I think what they do is going to be different, but I think I'm optimistic for a bunch of different reasons of what I think can happen. And I think over the past 2 years, we've really seen the industry grow pretty significantly, but we haven't seen, as much change, I guess. But over the next 2 or 3 years, this is where I think we're going to see a ton of changes in the sports card industry. And I think when it comes to someone buying and selling, like there's going to be a lot of changes and there's going to be a lot of adjustments that they're going to have to make. And that's just kind of the reality of the situation. I think there's going to be tons of stuff that is different over the next 2 years compared to where it is now and compared to where it was a few years ago. So it's going to be very interesting to see. And, I'm optimistic, and I hope that everybody that watches this video will maybe feel a little bit better if they were a little bit nervous about Fanatics taking over these sports card licenses. Thank you all for watching the video. Make sure you go like and subscribe. And if you haven't followed me on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, make sure you go do that as well. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.